Hello, honeys, and welcome to your coverage of the first calendar week of June, the 1st through the 7th. Besides a quick reminder to give our guest special episodes a listen, and yes, I did use the plural because it ended up being a two-parter for you all. We have no other updates or announcements, so let's go ahead and get started. Beginning with some updates on a couple previous stories. A headline that caught the attention of the entire arts world: the Whitney Museum has suspended its independent study program after backlash over the cancellation of its pro-Palestine performance. The Whitney is suspending the 2025 through 2026 iteration of the ISP, but said it expects to bring the program back for the 2026 through 27 academic year. The Whitney's ISP has gained a reputation since its absorption into the museum in the 80s as an incubator for top curatorial, critical, and artistic talent. Its alumni lists include the artists LaToya Ruby Frazier, Glenn Lingen, Enrique Taravanija, as well as the critics Huey Copeland and Roberta Smith. Here's where things get interesting. The museum presented a sort of chicken and egg reasoning for the suspension of the program, as the museum has decided that ISP director Sarah Nadal-Melzio's position, quote, will not be maintained, end quote, while it is suspended, yet apparently that is also one of the reasons for its suspension. Nadal-Melzio inaugurated the role of associate director just last year and spoke very publicly in favor of the artists behind the canceled pro-Palestine performance. The museum's own press statements read in part, quote, given the effort participants make to travel from across the world to join the ISP, we believe it would be a disservice to welcome a new cohort in September with the present gap in leadership. We think the most responsible approach is to take the coming months to hear from our community, reflect on the ISP's tremendous recent growth and change, and find a new long-term director to lead the program forward, end quote. Yet as many in the art world were quick to point out, this whole situation reeks of censorship and reprimand. Very shortly after this headline broke, over 300 ISP alumni and community members representing decades of the program signed an open letter to the museum outlining their, quote, unequivocal support, end quote, for the current cohort. That letter reads in part, quote, the canceled performance, scrutinized artwork and scholarship, and atmosphere of censorship have their roots in a broader political climate of fear and intimidation in the United States and follow other recent crackdowns on free expression, protest, and speech by artists and scholars supporting Palestine, end quote. We additionally learned that UK art dealer Ogonochukwu Ojiri was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail at the Central Criminal Court of England and Wales after pleading guilty in May to 8 charges of failing to disclose potential terrorist financing. On May 8th, he was charged by the Metropolitan Police as, quote, the first person to be charged with a specific offense under Section 21A of the Terrorism Act 2000, end quote, meaning he sold art to a suspected Hezbollah financier. According to BBC News, Judge Chima Grube added that there was no evidence that Ojiri supported any form of extremism, but that his conduct undermined the detection of terrorist financing. Our sources report that police said Ojiri's charges under the Terrorism Act of 2000, quote, are aimed at sending a clear message to the art world about the need for due diligence to ensure compliance with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing measures requiring the reporting of any suspicious transactions, end quote. We additionally learned about a new regulation coming into play around EU import laws that promises art market shakeups. Le Figaro reported Tuesday that concerns among European Union art dealers are rising in anticipation of this upcoming regulation, set to go into effect on June 28th, which will require thorough provenance research on cultural objects originating from outside the EU. This legislation will build on a 2019 regulation primarily focused on combating terrorism financing through illegal artwork trafficking. The regulation, titled Regulation EU 2019/880, requires European auction houses, gallery owners, and antique dealers to provide material evidence, quote, attesting that cultural goods older than 200 years, 250 years for archaeological objects, including fragments from monuments or heritage sites, and valued at over 18,000 euros, archaeological elements will have no minimum value, being imported into the European Union were acquired from their countries of origin by lawful means, end quote. It does have one loophole if the country of origin of the cultural property cannot be identified, the importer can provide evidence that it was lawfully exported from the last country in which it resided for 5 years. European Union dealers mostly fear that incoming cultural property may still be seized if dealers can't prove its country of origin. They are also concerned about the risk that for fears of confiscation, non-EU collectors will choose not to engage with EU art market, especially this now lengthier license process. We'll see how it plays out and keep you updated. A 17th century Dutch painting rescued from a dusty barn attic has sold for more than $7 million US. The work in question is titled View of Olinda, Brazil, with ruins of the Jesuit church from 1666. It's a masterpiece by Frans Post, one of the first European-trained artists to depict the landscapes of Dutch Brazil. Our sources say its provenance is a fascinating part of the story here. The painting was owned by a series of Parisians, likely including Joseph Fesch, Napoleon's maternal uncle, before ending up in a private collection and a dusty barn attic, of course, in Connecticut. The piece sold less than 2 minutes after it hit the auction block at Sotheby's last month for that $7 million, which is a record for the artist. Honeys, I feel like every time I say this is the most bizarre headline, the universe and the art world like to just do me one better. This week's most bizarre story I've ever reported on, the Rijksmuseum has put a 200-year-old condom featuring erotic artwork on view. In a display of various historical objects surrounding sex work and sexual health, the museum has put on view a 19th century condom made of sheepskin and etched with an erotic print. The artwork in question is 7.9 inches long, dated to approximately 1830 when it was likely a souvenir from a luxury brothel in France. The inscription below the image of a nun opening her bare legs to 3 pantsless clergymen reads Voilà mon choix, which translates to, in English, "This is my choice." Joyce Zellen, a curator of prints at the Rijksmuseum and the one who secured the condom's acquisition last November after coming across it in a private auction in Harlem, told Hyperallergic that, quote, "On one hand, it shows a sort of parody on religious celibacy, but the composition is also clearly a joke on the Judgment of Paris, where he, the Prince of Troy, chooses the most beautiful of the 3 Greek goddesses before him. For me, that underlines the potential clientele for such a luxury condom with a print. They were probably a wealthy and well-read person," end quote. There's still quite a few questions of WTF here, so let's talk about it. Zellen has said that she chose to include this particular object to balance the story presented in the exhibition. Condoms, in her opinion, speak to the dangers and proliferation of syphilis within that particular context ahead of the development of penicillin. It also balances the male fantasy erotic prints that are in that exhibition, and for the educational side, images and stories from medical publications are balanced with this more lighthearted depiction. The condom itself is also rare as one of only 2 such objects that have survived to the present day. And this is important, said Rebecca Fassman, a curator at the Kinsey Institute for Research in Sex, Gender, and Reproduction in Bloomington. Quote, "Part of our shared humanity, as proven by items like this etched condom, is that not only were people having non-procreative sex, but they're also laughing about it and creating material culture that was also sort of in on the joke," end quote. And if it makes you feel better, because these specific types of condoms were not as washable or as reusable as intended, and also it's etched, it's not going to do anything, Zellen is quite confident that this one was never used. The condom and the rest of the exhibition will be on display at the Rijksmuseum until sometime in November. We also heard that Rio de Janeiro's National Museum of Brazil will temporarily reopen. The art newspaper reported that this month, 7 years after a devastating fire which destroyed around 90% of the museum's collection and severely damaged the building, 3 galleries will be open to the public. The museum hopes this opening will show the public what efforts it is making to rebuild, what exhibitions are planned for its official whole building reopening in 2028. On view in one of the newly opened rooms will be the Bendigo meteorite, which was found in 1784 in Bahia and is one of few artifacts to survive the fire. We also also heard about a campaign launched last week by the Hepworth Wakefield Museum of West Yorkshire, where the artist was born, to raise £3.8 million, or $5 million US, to buy a rare sculpture of Barbara Hepworth's and keep it on British soil. The UK government has temporarily blocked the export of the work in question, titled Sculpture with Color Oval Form, Pale Blue and Red from 1943, despite its sale at Christie's in London last March, because they want a UK institution to purchase it, said the UK's Arts Minister Sir Charles Bryant at that time, quote, "I hope a UK buyer can be found for this sculpture so the British public can continue to learn and engage with one of our most important artists for generations to come." The campaign is backed by artists and creative figures like Anish Kapoor, Sir Anthony Gormley, Jonathan Anderson, Richard Deacon, Dame Rachel Whiteread, but another £2.9 million, or $3.9 million US, is required to prevent this exportation before the August 27th deadline. We'll let you know if they make it. Furthermore, we heard that the San Francisco Art Institute campus will become a free experimental studio program site. The new experimental education institution, in the vein of the renowned Black Mountain College, is the brainchild of philanthropist Laureen Powell Jobs, the school's founder and board president as well, though it is unclear exactly when this new institution will open on the historic campus. Bit of background for the honeys here. The San Francisco Arts Institute was one of the nation's oldest art schools and suspended educational activities in 2022. It later filed for bankruptcy after a failed deal with neighboring University of San Francisco meant to transfer its debts and programs via a merger. The upcoming California Academy of Studio Arts, or CASA, will offer a class of up to 30 emerging artists per year, a year-long, free, unaccredited studio-based program intended to foster experimentation and collaboration, and which will also supply them with a wide range of resources, according to our sources. The historic campus is currently undergoing a renovation, and when finished, the state-protected Diego Rivera mural from 1931 on the campus, titled The Making of a Fresco, showing the building of a city, will also be open to the public. We additionally heard that Tel Aviv Museum of Art staffers are continuing their protests. They have been doing so daily outside the institution's public entrance since April by lining up and standing in opposition to it for the 30 minutes prior to opening. The museum workers aim to support ending the genocide in Gaza and are echoed in growing protests across Israel, said the museum's Israeli art curator, Dalit Matadyahu, quote, "We stand because the pain has become unbearable," end quote. Yet the last week also saw UK museums defending corporate funding amid, quote, "relentless negativity," end quote. A group of officials overseeing major UK cultural institutions, including the British Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, the National Gallery, have signed a public letter defending the practice, which has been widely criticized by activist groups: the use of funding from corporate sponsors. Their letter argues that business partnerships help cultural organizations expand and compete for prestige, but there was a notable absence from the signatories. No representatives from the Tate Museum network joined in on it, even though the director of the Tate, Maria Balshaw, recently opposed British Petroleum's £50 million sponsorship of the British Museum, saying that such a deal was out of step with public opinion. On a more serious note, the Paris Holocaust Museum and 3 other synagogues were vandalized with green paint in Paris last week. Several Jewish sites in Paris's Jewish quarter were vandalized with the paint on Friday and Saturday, including the Memorial de la Shoah, the Tournelles Synagogue, and the Agudas HaKehilos Synagogue, as well as a third synagogue in a different part of the city and a restaurant too. Sources report that Le Mur de Justice, the Wall of the Righteous, located along the Shoah Museum's facade, which contains the names of thousands who helped save Jews from Nazi persecution, was targeted. Meanwhile, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency reported on Sunday that while it's been common in France for red paint to be used as protest against Israel and the ongoing genocide in Gaza, the meaning of the green paint is unknown. An investigation is underway for the damage and potential hate crimes committed here. Meanwhile, Mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, said in a statement, quote, "I condemn these intimidations in the strongest possible terms. Anti-Semitism has no place in our city and in our republic. I have asked the sanitation department to intervene urgently. We will file a complaint," end quote. We also heard about a Pennsylvania man who has pled guilty to peddling fake Picasso and Basquiat works. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, 77-year-old Carter Reese was charged with 1 count count of wire fraud and 1 count of mail fraud for an alleged art forgery scheme active between February 2019 and March 2021, in which Reese allegedly misrepresented the artworks as genuines from some of the most popular decorated names in modern and contemporary art. Because all of these names, Basquiat, Lichtenstein, Haring, Bacon, all have 8 or 9 figure auction records, it's very likely he was defrauding in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Though our sources didn't exactly say, it's one of the reasons this headline caught our attention. A joint investigation by members of the FBI's art crime team working in Philadelphia and Miami uncovered the scheme. Reese is being prosecuted by Assistant U.S. Attorneys Ruth Mandelbaum and Jason Grinnell and will be sentenced in September. He faces a potential 40-year prison term. And moving right along, honeys, a 30-year-old domestic tourist damaged 2 warriors of China's esteemed Terracotta Army in an incident on Friday. For those who are not familiar, the Terracotta Army necropolis was created around 210 BCE to accompany China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, in the afterlife, with over 8,000 individualized life-size clay soldiers, as well as hundreds of horses, chariots, and real bronze weaponry. It was discovered in 1974 by local farmers. The man in question climbed the protective fence surrounding the tomb and jumped into the 18-foot deep restricted pit at the mausoleum of Qi Shi Huang in Xi'an, China. Officials believe he, quote, suffers from mental illness, unquote, and is currently under investigation, but spokespeople have confirmed that the museum remains open at this time. Last week also saw a British artist cover a transphobic billboard with a giant dachshund drawing. Working under the name You're All Right You Are, abbreviated as Yaya, the street artist added their revision to this billboard reading, "Should athletes born as men be muscling in on women's sport?" located in West Yorkshire, and which was part of a controversial ad campaign from the daily conservative newspaper, The Telegraph, earlier in May. The Trans Advocacy and Complaints Collective had filed a complaint against the ad campaign, calling it a, quote, targeted hostile message directed at a marginalized community, trans women, framed in the language of fear and division, end quote, pointing out that the, quote, the phrase is a dog whistle designed to paint trans women as aggressive invaders, end quote. Yaya explained via email to our sources that they, quote, couldn't stand the thought of people reading it and it being so blatantly transphobic, end quote, so used some markers and spray paint to design the enormous orange cartoon dachshund with a benign smile and blue speckles over the Telegraph's billboard. He decided to name it Savaloy after the bright red pork sausage that's ubiquitous among British fish and chip shops. We additionally learned that nearly half the protected land around the Nazca lines of Peru is now open to minors. The artworks in question are geoglyphs depicting wildlife, domestic animals, and much more created by Peru's Nazca people of 2,000 years ago and known as the Nazca Lines. They were designated as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1994 and are among the nation's most popular tourist attractions today. According to the Associated Press, the government of Peru has slashed the borders of the protected archaeological park that encompasses the Nazca Lines by about half, opening up an area about the size of 1,400 soccer fields. Mariano Castro, Peru's former vice minister of the environment, tells AP that the new lack of protection may come with, quote, very serious risks and cumulative damage, end quote, especially as the AP reported the very next day that the Peruvian government is now accepting permit applications from minors with active or pending claims in the area, meaning that they'll likely begin operating legally very soon. Peruvian environmental lawyer Cesare Penza was quoted in AP saying, quote, it's incredible how the government is not even interested in the heritage of our ancestors that is unprotected and will be destroyed without any control, end quote. Which is part of the reason we care here. Their value, although researchers have found smaller artifacts of the Nazca civilization, for example, textiles and painted pottery, the geoglyphs are by far the most enduring, spectacular remnants of the culture. And beyond that, we don't even fully know the Nazca Lines' scope. About 430 geoglyphs were identified in the near century after their 1927 discovery, but just last year, scientists using drones assisted by AI found 303 more. This is a very serious situation, honeys, in the debates about archaeology preservation versus economics. The winner of the Bennett Prize was also announced after deliberation by its first all-women jury. The prize is the largest art award offered to women working in the field of figurative painting and made its winner announced announcement via the unveiling of an exhibition at the Muskegon Museum of Art in Western Michigan. Dr. Elaine Melody Schmidt, an art collector who co-founded the Bennett Prize along with her husband, made up a quarter of the board. The rest were Margaret Boland, painter and faculty member at the New York Academy of Art, Angela Fraley, painter and professor at Moravian University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and Gloria Groom, Winton Green curator of 19th century European painting and sculpture at the Art Institute of Chicago. The winner this year was Dallas-based Amy Wernz, a finalist for the second Bennett Prize in 2021. And although the prize itself is super cool, first place consists of $50K and a 2027 solo show that will travel in conjunction with work from all the finalists for the fifth Bennett Prize. It's also a fantastic launch pad, says Art News, quote, "The prize's finalists and 3 winners so far have won 19 additional awards and been featured in over 50 national publications. Many have become represented by galleries, participated in residencies, and sold pieces to museums and other permanent collections," end quote. In a new article in the journal PLOS One, published on Wednesday, researchers from the University of Groningen combined AI and carbon dating to find that many of the Dead Sea Scrolls are older than scholars previously estimated. Some, in fact, could date to the time of the biblical authors themselves rather than centuries after. We didn't know prior to now because early dating efforts, mainly done in the 1950s, were skewed by the application of castor oil to the scrolls in an attempt to make the manuscripts readable, but which had the unintended side effect of scrambling the radiocarbon results. The team of researchers not only cleaned the samples before dating them again, they trained an AI model to analyze ink patterns across the scrolls. When tested, the AI model, fondly named Enoch, produced dates that matched the corrected carbon readings 85% of the time. This particular instance of AI is important because the method does not require destructive material sampling associated with traditional radiocarbon dating demands, and important findings can come from this proper redating. For example, quote, "Writing styles previously believed to belong to distinct eras, Hasmonean and Herodian scripts, were, as it turns out, being used simultaneously for far longer than expected. History, as usual, refuses to be tidy," end quote. And finally, honeys, researchers have replicated an ancient Egyptian blue pigment. A team led by Washington State University has managed to recreate Egyptian blue, considered the oldest manufactured pigment in history and used to adorn wood, jewelry, other items, while working in partnership with the Smithsonian's Museum Conservation Institute and the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. The team developed 12 separate recipes using varying combinations of ingredients that would have been available at the time before heating each at about 1,000 degrees Celsius for up to 11 hours, again, conditions likely used by ancient artisans. They found that one recipe using only some of the ingredients worked, and samples of it are currently on display at the Carnegie Museum as part of a new exhibition on ancient Egypt. And there are your headlines, your buzz for the week. Hope you enjoyed, honeys. I'm going to go ahead and let you go because it's been a long episode. Take care, hydrate or dehydrate, eat your proteins and veggies, all that good stuff. We'll talk soon. This podcast is produced, created, hosted, formerly edited, and fact-checked by master's degree holder Celia Bugno. Chris Meinhold is responsible for our editing, mixing, and our intro and outro music. Special thanks to him for that. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, so on all your favorite listening as well as social media channels.